and a deep compassion seized his heart. While the prince was pondering on the problem of evil, he beheld with his mind's eye under the jambu tree a lofty figure endowed with majesty, calm and dignified. "Whence comest thou, and who mayst thou be?" asked the prince. In reply the vision said, "I am a Samama. Troubled at the thought of old age, disease, and death, I have left my home to seek the path of salvation. All things hasten to decay, only the truth abides forever. Everything changes, and there is no permanency, yet the words of the Buddhas are immutable. I long for the happiness that does not decay, the treasure that will never perish, the life that knows of no beginning and no end. Therefore, I have destroyed all worldly thought. I have retired into an unfrequented dell to live in solitude, and, begging for food, I devote myself to the one thing needful." Siddhartha asked, "Can peace be gained in this world of unrest? I am struck with the emptiness of pleasure and have become disgusted with lust. All oppresses me, and existence itself seems intolerable." The Samama replied, "Where heat is, there is also a possibility of cold. Creatures subject to pain possess the faculty of pleasure. The origin of evil indicates that good can be developed. For these things are correlatives. Thus where there is much suffering, there will be much bliss, if thou but open thine eyes to behold it. Just as a man who has fallen into a heap awful ought to seek the great pond of water covered with lotuses, which is nearby, even so seek thou for the great deathless lake of nirvana to wash off the defilement of wrong. If the lake is not sought, it is not the fault of the lake. Even so when there is a blessed road leading the man held fast by wrong to the salvation of nirvana, if the road is not walked upon, it is not the fault of the road, but of the person. And when a man who I saw pressed with sickness, there being a physician who can heal him, does not avail himself of the physician's help, that is not the fault of the physician. Even so when a man oppressed by the malady of wrongdoing does not seek the spiritual guide of enlightenment, that is no fault of the evil-destroying guide." The prince listened to the noble words of his visitor and said, "Thou bringest good tidings, for now I know that my purpose will be accomplished. My father advises me to enjoy life and to undertake worldly duties, such as will bring honor to me and to our house. He tells me that I am too young still, that my pulse beats too full to lead a religious life." The venerable figure shook his head and replied, "Thou shouldst know that for seeking a religious life no time can be opportune." A thrill of joy passed through Siddhartha's heart. "Now is the time to seek religion," he said. "Now is the time to sever all ties that would prevent me from attaining perfect enlightenment. Now is the time to wander into homelessness and, leading a mendicant's life, to find the path of deliverance." The celestial messenger heard the resolution of Siddhartha with approval. "Now, indeed," he added, "is the time to seek religion. Go, Siddhartha, and accomplish thy purpose. For thou art Bodhisattva, the Buddha elect. Thou art destined to enlighten the world. Thou art the Tathagata, the great master, for thou wilt fulfill all righteousness and be Dharmarjya, the king of truth. Thou art Bhagavat, the blessed one, for thou art called upon to become the Savior and Redeemer of the world. Fulfill thou the perfection of truth. Though the thunderbolt descend upon thy head, yield thou never to the allurements that beguile men from the path of truth. As the sun at all seasons pursues his own course, nor ever goes on another, even so if thou forsake not the straight path of righteousness, thou shalt become a Buddha. Persevere in thy quest and thou shalt find what thou seekest. Pursue thy aim unswervingly and thou shalt gain the prize. Struggle earnestly and thou shalt conquer. The benediction of all deities, of all saints, of all that seek light is upon thee, and heavenly wisdom guides thy steps. Thou shalt be the Buddha, our Master, and our Lord. Thou shalt enlighten the world and save mankind from perdition. Having thus spoken, the vision vanished, and Siddhartha's heart was filled with peace. He said to himself, I have awakened to the truth and I am resolved to accomplish my purpose. I will sever all the ties that bind me to the world, and I will go out from my home to seek the way of salvation. The Buddhas are beings whose words cannot fail, there is no departure from truth in their speech. For as the fall of a stone thrown into the air, as the death of a mortal, as the sunrise at dawn, as the lion's roar when he leaves his lair, as the delivery of a woman with child, as all these things are sure and certain, even so the word of the Buddhas is sure and cannot fail. Verily I shall become a Buddha. The prince returned to the bedroom of his wife to take a last farewell glance at those whom he dearly loved above all Kshatriyasuris of the earth. He longed to take the infant once more into his arms and kiss him with a parting kiss. But the child lay in the arms of his mother, and the prince could not lift him without awakening both. There Siddhartha stood gazing at his beautiful wife and his beloved son, and his heart grieved. The pain of parting overcame him powerfully. Although his mind was determined, so that nothing, be it good or evil, could shake his resolution, the tears flowed freely from his eyes, and it was beyond his power to check their stream. But the prince tore himself away with unmanly heart, suppressing his feelings but not extinguishing his memory. The Bodhisattva mounted his noble steed Kantaka, and when he left the palace, Mar stood in the gate and stopped him. Depart not, O my lord, exclaimed Mar. In 7 days from now the wheel of empire will appear, and will make thee sovereign over the 4 continents and the 2,000 adjacent islands. Therefore, stay, my lord. The Bodhisattva replied, well do I know that the wheel of empire will appear to me, but it is not sovereignty that I desire. It will become a Buddha and make all the world shout for joy. Thus Siddhartha, the prince, renounced power and worldly pleasures, gave up his kingdom, severed all ties, and went into homelessness. He rode out into the silent night, accompanied only by his faithful charioteer Shanna. Darkness lay upon the earth, but the stars shone brightly in the heavens. 8 King Bimbisra Siddhartha had cut his waving hair and had exchanged his royal robe for a mean dress of the color of the ground. Having sent home Shanna, the charioteer, together with the noble steed Kanthaka, to King Suddhodana to bear him the message that the prince had left the world, the Bodhisattva walked along on the highroad with a beggar's bowl in his hand. Yet the majesty of his mind was ill-concealed under the poverty of his appearance. His erect gait betrayed his royal birth and his eyes beamed with a fervid zeal for truth. The beauty of his youth was transfigured by holiness and surrounded his head like a halo. All the people who saw this unusual sight gazed at him in wonder. Those who were in haste arrested their steps and looked back, and there was no one who did not pay him homage. Having entered the city of Rajagaha, the prince went from house to house silently waiting till the people offered him food. Wherever the Blessed One came, the people gave him what they had. They bowed before him in humility and were filled with gratitude because he condescended to approach their homes. Old and young people were moved and said, "This is a noble Muni, his approach is bliss. What a great joy for us!" And King Bimbisra, noticing the commotion in the city, inquired the cause of it, and when he learned the news sent one of his attendants to observe the stranger. Having heard that the Muni must be a Sakya and of noble family, and that he had retired to the bank of a flowing river in Thwoods to eat the food in his bowl, the king was moved in his shiart. He donned his royal robe, placed his golden crown upon his head and went out in the company of aged and wise counselors to meet his mysterious guest. The king found the Muni of the Sakya race seated under a tree contemplating the composure of his face and the gentleness of his deportment. Bimbisra greeted him reverently and said, "O Samama, thy hands are fit to grasp the reins of an empire and should not hold a beggar's bowl. I am sorry to see thee wasting thy youth. Believing that thou art of royal descent, I invite thee to join me in the government of my country and share my royal power. Desire for power is becoming to the noble-minded, and wealth should not be despised. To grow rich and lose religion is not true gain. But he who possesses all three, power, wealth, and religion, enjoying them in discretion and with wisdom, him I call a great master." The great Sakyamuni lifted his eyes and replied, "Thou art known, O king, to be liberal and religious, and thy words are prudent. A kind man who makes good use of wealth I rightly said to possess a great treasure, but the miser who hoards up his riches will have no profit. Charity is rich in returns. Charity is the greatest wealth, for it scatters, it brings no repentance. I have severed all ties because I seek deliverance. How is it possible for me to return to the world? He who seeks religious truth, which is the highest treasure of all, must leave behind all that can concern him or draw away his attention, and must be bent upon that one goal alone. He must free his soul from covetousness and lust, and also from the desire for power. Indulge in lust but a little, and lust like a child will grow wield worldly power and you will be burdened with cares. Better than sovereignty over the earth, better than living in heaven, better than lordship over all the worlds, is the fruit of holiness. The Bodhisattva has recognized the illusory nature of wealth and will not take poison as food. Will a fish that has been baited still covet the hook, or an escaped bird love the net? Would a rabbit rescued from the serpent's mouth go back to be devoured? Would a man who has burnt his hand with a torch take up the torch after he had dropped it to the earth? Would a blind man who has recovered his sight desire to spoil his eyes again? The sick man suffering from fever seeks for a cooling medicine. Shall we advise him to drink that which will increase the fever? Shall we quench a fire by heaping fuel upon it? I pray thee, pity me not. Rather pity those who are burdened with the cares of royalty and the worry of great riches. They enjoy them in fear and trembling, for they are constantly threatened with a loss of those boons on whose possession their hearts are set, and when they die they cannot take along either their gold or the kingly diadem. My heart hankers after no vulgar profit, so I have put away my royal inheritance and prefer to be free from the burdens of life. Therefore, try not to entangle me in new relationships and duties, nor hinder me from completing the work I have begun. I regret to leave thee. But I will go to the sages who can teach religion and so find the path on which we can escape evil. May thy country enjoy peace and prosperity, and may wisdom bestow upon thy rule like the brightness of the noonday sun. May thy royal power be strong and may righteousness be the scepter in thy hand." The king, clasping his hands with reverence, bowed down before Sakyamuni and said, "Mayest thou obtain that which thou seekest, and when thou hast obtained it, come back, I pray thee, and receive me as thy disciple." The Bodhisattva parted from the king in friendship and goodwill, and purposed in his heart to grant his request. 9. The Bodhisattva's Search Alra and Uddaka were renowned as teachers among the Brahmins, and there was no one in those days who surpassed them in learning Gond philosophical knowledge. The Bodhisattva went to them and sat at their feet. He listened to their doctrines of the Atman or self, which is the ego of Themend and the doer of all doings. He learned their views of the transmigration of souls and of the law of karma, how the souls of bad men had to suffer by being reborn in men of low caste, in animals, or in hell, while those who purified themselves by libations, by sacrifices, and by self-mortification would become kings, or Brahmins, or Devas, so as to rise higher and higher in the grades of existence. He studied their incantations and offerings and the methods by which they attained deliverance of ego from material existence in states of ecstasy. Alra said, "What is that self which perceives the actions of the 5 roots of mind, touch, smell, taste, sight, and hearing? What is that which is active in the 2 ways of motion, in the hands and in the feet?" The problem of the soul appears in the expressions "I say, I know and perceive, I come, and I go or I will stay here. Thy soul is not thy body, it is not thy eye, not thy ear, not thy nose, not thy tongue, nor is it the mind. The I is the one who feels the touch in thy body. The I is the smeller in the nose, the taster in the tongue, these are in the eye, the hearer in the ear, and the thinker in Themend. The I moves thy hands and thy feet. The I is thy soul. Doubt in the existence of the soul is irreligious, and without discerning this truth there is no way of salvation. Deep speculation will easily involve the mind, it leads to confusion and unbelief, but a purification of the soul leads to the way of escape. True deliverance is reached by removing from the crowd and leading a hermit's life, depending entirely on alms for food, putting away all desire and clearly recognizing the non-existency of matter. We reach a state of perfect emptiness. Here we find the condition of immaterial fife. As the munja grass when freed from its horny case, as a sword when drawn from its scabbard, or as the wild bird escaped from its prison, so the ego, liberating itself from all limitations, finds perfect release. This is true deliverance, but those only who will have deep faith will learn. The Bodhisattva found no satisfaction in these teachings. He replied, "People are in bondage, because they have not yet removed the idea of the ego. The thing and its quality are different in our thought, but not in reality. Heat is different from fire in our thought, but you cannot remove heat from fire in reality. You say that you can remove the qualities and leave the thing, but if you think your theory to the end, you will find that this is not so. Is not man an organism of many aggregates? Are we not composed of various attributes? Man consists of the material form, of sensation, of thought, of dispositions, and, lastly, of understanding. That which men call the ego when they say I am is not an entity behind the attributes, it originates by their cooperation. There is mind, there is sensation and thought, and there is truth, and truth is mind when it walks in the path of righteousness. But there is no separate ego soul outside or behind the thought of man. He who believes that the ego is a distinct being has no correct conception of things. The very search for the Atman is wrong, it is a wrong start and it will lead you in a false direction. How much confusion of thought comes from our interest in self, and from our vanity when thinking _I am so great, or _I have done this wonderful deed. The thought of thine ego stands between thy rational nature and truth, banish it, and then wilt thou see things as they are. He who thinks correctly will rid himself of ignorance and acquire wisdom. The ideas _I am and _I shall be or _I shall not be do not occur to a clear thinker. Moreover, if our ego remains, how can we attain true deliverance? If the ego is to be reborn in any of the three worlds, be it in hell, upon earth, or be it even in heaven, we shall meet again and again the same inevitable doom of sorrow. We shall remain chained to the wheel of individuality and shall be implicated in egotism and wrong. All combination is subject to separation, and we cannot escape birth, disease, old age, and death. Is this a final escape? Said Adaka, consider the unity of things. Things are not their parts, yet they exist. The members and organs of thy body are not thine ego, but thine ego possesses all these parts. What, for instance, is the Ganges? Is the sand the Ganges? Is the water the Ganges? Is the hither bank the Ganges? Is the farther bank the Ganges? The Ganges is a mighty river and it possesses all these several qualities. Exactly so is our ego. But the Bodhisattva replied, not so, sir. If we accept the water, the sand, the hither bank and the farther bank, where can we find any Ganges? In the same way I observe the activities of man in their harmonious union, but there is no ground for an ego outside its parts. The Brahmin sage, however, insisted on the existence of the ego, saying, the ego is the doer of our deeds. How can there be karma without a self as its performer? Do we not see around us the effects of karma? What makes men different in character, station, possessions, and fate? It is their karma, and karma includes merit and demerit. The transmigration of the soul is subject to its karma. We inherit from former existences the evil effects of our evil deeds and the good effects of our good deeds. If that were not so, how could we be different? The Tathagata meditated deeply on the problems of transmigration and karma, and found the truth that lies in them. The doctrine of karma, he said, is undeniable, but the theory of the ego has no foundation. Like everything else in nature, the life of man is subject to the law of cause and effect. The present reaps what the past has sown, and the future is the product of the present. But there is no evidence of the existence of an immutable ego being, of a self which remains the same and migrates from body to body. There is rebirth but no transmigration. Is not this individuality of mine a combination, material as well as mental? Is it not made up of qualities that sprang into being by a gradual evolution? The 5 roots of sense perception in this organism have come from ancestors who performed these functions. The ideas which I think, came to me partly from others who thought them, and partly they rise from combinations of the ideas in my own mind. Those who have used the same sense organs, and have thought the same ideas before I was composed into this individuality of mine are my previous existences. They are my ancestors as much as the _I_ of yesterday is the father of the _I_ of today, and the karma of my past deeds conditions the fate of my present existence. Supposing there were an Atman that performs the actions of the senses, then if the door of sight were torn down and the eye plucked out, that Tman would be able to peep through the larger aperture and see the forms of its surroundings better and more clearly than before. It would be able to hear sounds better if the ears were torn away, smell better if the nose were cut off, taste better if the tongue were pulled out, and feel better if the body were destroyed. I observe the preservation and transmission of character, I perceive the truth of karma, but see no Tman whom your doctrine makes the doer of your deeds. There is rebirth without the transmigration of a self. For this Tman, this self, this ego and th_I_ say and in the _I_ will is an illusion. If this self were a reality, how could there be an escape from selfhood? The terror of hell would be infinite, and no release could be granted. The evils of existence would not be due to our ignorance and wrongdoing, but would constitute the very nature of our being. And the Bodhisattva went to the priests officiating in the temples. But the gentle mind of the Sakyamuni was offended at the unnecessary cruelty performed on the altars of the gods. He said, "Ignorance only can make these men prepare festivals and hold vast meetings for sacrifices. Far better to revere the truth than to appease the gods by shedding blood. What love can a man possess who believes that the destruction of life will atone for evil deeds? Can a new wrong expiate old wrongs? And can the slaughter of an innocent victim blot out the evil deeds of mankind? This is practicing religion by the neglect of moral conduct. Purify your hearts and cease to kill, that is true religion. Rituals have no efficacy, prayers are vain repetitions, and incantations have no saving power. But to abandon covetousness and lust, to become free from evil passions, and to give up all hatred and ill will, that is the right sacrifice and the true worship." 10 Uravel, the place of mortification. The Bodhisattva went in search of a better system and came to a settlement of 5 bhikkhus in the jungle of Uravel, and when the Blessed One saw the life of those 5 men, virtuously keeping in check their senses, subduing their passions, and practicing austere self-discipline, he admired their earnestness and joined their company. With holy zeal and a strong heart, the Sakyamuni gave himself up to meditative thought and rigorous mortification of the body. Whereas the 5 bhikkhus were severe, the Sakyamuni was severer still, and they revered him, their junior, as their master. So the Bodhisattva continued for 6 years patiently torturing himself and suppressing the wants of nature. He trained his body and exercised his mind in the modes of the most rigorous ascetic life. At last, he ate each day 1 hemp grain only, seeking to cross the ocean of birth and death and to arrive at the shore of deliverance. And when the Bodhisattva was a-hungered, lo! Mar, the evil one, approached him and said, "Thou art emaciated from fasts, and death is near. What good is thy exertion? Deign to live, and thou wilt be able to do good works." But the Sakyamuni made reply, "O friend of the indolent, thou wicked one, for what purpose hast thou come? Let the flesh waste away, if but the mind becomes more tranquil and attention more steadfast. What is life in this world? Death in battle is better to me than that I should live defeated." And Mar withdrew.